Hey everyone, this is Steve, curator of the MHS Military Collection with another episode of Keep 'em Rolling, a channel dedicated to preserving the memory of what the United States Armed Forces did during World War II. Now my goal for this channel is to share with all of you unique items from the collection, new acquisitions, to offer preservation tips, and to take you all on the occasional outside collecting adventure and visits to historic sites that focus on our country's military heritage. Now before we get started, I do want to give a shout out. Normally I would recommend a channel for you to watch and like, but today I want to give a shout out to my lovely wife and my beautiful daughter, two people that without their understanding, their assistance, their patience, none of this would be possible. So once again, I want to give a shout out to my lovely wife and my lovely daughter for allowing me to pursue this fantastic and fascinating hobby. Well, everyone, it's been an interesting past couple weeks here as far as military collecting goes. I attended several antique shows and visited a couple antique markets and found absolutely nothing. I thought I'd hit kind of a dry spell, and then stuff just kind of started pouring out of the woodwork. And it varies from World War II all the way up to Vietnam. I'm going to start here with these flight gloves. A beautiful set of the leather A9A high-altitude flight gloves. These are the type that have the mitten for the hand, the trigger finger for firing the machine gun, the thumb here. Beautiful. I mean, the leather on these is just absolutely gorgeous, just soft and supple. The only problem with these is in kind of the area here of the thumb. You can see where the thread has torn loose, and it's on both pairs. You can see it here even better where the thread is torn loose. Now this is not a real big problem. I'm not planning on wearing these. They're just for display, and I could very easily fix those just with some thread following the original holes, but I don't need to because, once again, they're just on display, but nothing to detract from these, and you can't beat the price. These were actually given to me by an individual who discovered that I like to collect military items. They were using these. They'd been given to them by an uncle who was in World War II, and they had been using them for snow blowing. They decided with this kind of tearing out because of the snow blowing, they're going to buy a more modern pair of gloves, and they felt these kind of had historical value, so they didn't want to just throw them away. I was very, very pleased and grateful that they came to me. These are the gauntlet type, where you can fold the gauntlet down if you wanted to, or leave it up. They have wonderful tags here. You know, property, Air Force, United States Army, etc., etc. So just a nice, honest, clean pair of World War II Army Air Force flying gloves, something I don't have in my collection, so quite pleased to receive those. Next, we have a book here, Battle for Korea, A History of the Korean Conflict. This is by Robert J. Dvorak. This was also given to me. Now, I have to be careful with books because I am just overwhelmed with books right now. So what I tend to do is I tend to read through them, and if they're good, you know, I might keep them. If they're okay, I usually pass them on to somebody else. Now, I don't have a whole lot on Korea, so I kind of wanted to give this one extra scrutiny, and it turned out to be a very, very good book. I thought it was just going to be kind of a coffee table style, you know, a lot of pictures and things like that, and I tend not to add those to my collection, but this one actually has a lot of really good information about the Korean War, so I have a feeling I'm about halfway through right now. But if the book continues on the way it is, then this will end up staying with my collection. And if you're looking for a good book on Korea, I recommend taking a look at this one, Battle for Korea, Robert J. Dvorak. Next to it here, this also was just given to me. It's a driver's manual, United States Army, November 1944. Nice little driver's manual. Not identified, which is unfortunate, and it doesn't have the driver's license either, but it's still just a clean example that will go into the collection. So we drift on here, a couple of knives that made its way into my collection. The one here on the right, it's a PAL fighting knife, as we zoom in here, RH-36 PAL. Nice knife. When I got it, it was a little rusty, so I had to work on cleaning up the blade using some oil, kind of bring it back. You can see some pitting and some staining, but nothing that terribly detracts from the blade at all. It's a nice tight knife. There's no rattle. It's not loose. Just a nice example of a fighting knife. It did come with the original scabbard here. This is the World War II style leathered scabbard with the sewing and the rivets. And it has a name on it, but this name is not the individual who owned the knife. I got this from a good friend. He knew that I collected militaria, and he actually received this about 25 years ago from the veteran himself. He said the veteran gave it to him, told him that he had been in World War II, that he had fought at the Battle of the Bulge, and then at the conclusion of World War II, he had actually gone on and re-upped and fought in Korea. This knife, he said, had accompanied him through both conflicts, and about the time that he transitioned from World War II to Korea, he said the scabbard wore out. So he replaced the scabbard. I don't know how he managed to get this one, but he said the scabbard did not belong to the veteran, originally. However, the knife was the knife that he carried all through World War II and then into Korea. It's just a neat find, and I was quite honored to have him think of me and have me take possession and ownership and care of this knife. Now, I was able to do some research, and I found out that the gentleman, I'm not going to reveal his name, but the gentleman was part of the 9th Army, and he was a member of the 820th Tank Destroyers, and this confirmed that he was at the Battle of the Bulge. So how cool is that? I mean, to have a piece of history like this, to be able to hold something in your hand and say, this item was at the Battle of the Bulge, it's just wild. This little piece of paper here, just in case anybody wonders, is actually the information about the knife, and I'll put it back with it. That way I keep the guy's name and everything else. Now, the next piece, just a simple mess kit knife. Got the company there, LF&C, 1944. Clear date, clear U.S. stamp. These are always handy to have around. I mean, you always see the mess kits, but the silverware tends to be a little bit more elusive, especially those that are dated like that. And this came from an uncle-in-law. Him and his wife are cleaning out their home. They're moving into a condominium. They're kind of downsizing, and they keep finding little things like this and bringing them to me. He also dropped off these items here. He was in Vietnam, and he decided he didn't really need all of his uniforms, so he brought me a duffel bag of stuff. A lot of the stuff was kind of his training uniforms and that, but in the duffel bag was his jungle hat here, 1968, I believe, dated, yep, 1968 dated. Clean, clear tags. It's got a little bit of wear, but that's what I like to see. This hat was used by him. It was worn in country in Vietnam. And along with that, we have his jungle boots. These are also dated 1968. Dated here in the front. Let's see, zoom in. Right there, 1968. And when I got them, I thought about polishing them up. I thought about tying them up, really making them look nice. But in talking with him, according to him, these boots, this is basically how they left Vietnam. They were put into his duffel bag, and he hadn't gotten them out since. So I thought, that's cleaning them up is kind of taking away the history of these. This is how they were last taken off his feet when he was in Vietnam and put into his duffel bag to come home at the conclusion of his time in country, if you will. Stuffed in them were the socks. So they are going to stay just like this. Now, I don't collect Vietnam, but in this case, I'm going to make an exception as it's family, and just to have an ID'd set like this is too cool in my opinion. Moving over here, well, we have some manuals. I'll get to those in just a moment, but these I found at a flea market. We have a flea market that pops up every once in a while. Lots of good stuff, but just very little militaria. And I'd gone through the whole market, got to the very end, and these were on the guy's table. They kind of caught my eye. This one was the one that I liked. I saw it, picked it up, April 1944. He wanted $7 each. He had one that was open, this one here, and then he had two that were still sealed. I hemmed and hawed. I mean, $7 for something that I don't know what they are. I thought, do I buy one that's open so I have something I can display with the shells here? You can see the shells and how they read, April 44. Or do I buy one that's still sealed, which is really, really cool. And he saw me looking. He talked to me a little bit about, my intentions for them, etc. And he finally said, you know what, why don't you just take all three for $10? I could not pass that up. And as I was paying him, he said, well, let me throw these in as well. These are heat. They're like the heating tabs. They're Vietnam dated, so they're for heating rations. So I just threw both of those in as well. I'll probably move these on, as I don't collect Vietnam, as I said, unless it's something like this that's identified, family, and that. These, not so much, so I'll just move them on to someone who will appreciate them more. But these right here, in doing my research, what I discovered were these actually are RAF emergency flares. And what they were supposed to be used for is if your plane went down, let's say in the English Channel, you get into your dinghy, you would have these in the dinghy with you, and if you heard a boat coming or a plane coming, you get out the flare gun, you crack these open, they're waterproof as you can see, you're sealed with lead and then the waterproof tape. You crack them open, you pull out one of these cardboard shells, place it into the flare gun, and you signal the airplane or the ship as to where you're at. What this means now is I need to find a British flare gun to add to my collection. I don't really want to start collecting British items, but in this case I think I'll make an exception. And in doing my research, the funny part about it is the flare guns tend to be available. They're round, they're not extremely rare. What's rare are finding the flares still sealed. You see a lot of empty cartons of these, but you don't see the actual flares in that. And they're in excellent shape. I tend to shy away from having explosives that I don't know a whole lot about. But these are in such good shape, I'm not worried about them. Now, back to the manuals. Standard Korean War manuals. One's dated 1949, the other is dated 1952. Personal conduct for the soldier. Personal conduct for the soldier. Soldier's Guide. Just nice manuals. Once again, I shy away from collecting too many manuals as there seem to be a manual for everything. But with these right here, why I like them is they're just giving you the basic information of a soldier who was going in during the Korean time period. And they were also free. Now, the last item I'm going to share with you is this hat right here. This is a Korean War enlisted man's visor cap. I wasn't going to buy it. I saw it in an antique show that I attended. Once again, huge show. It's outdoors and indoors. Hundreds and hundreds of dealers with almost zero militaria. Militaria just is so popular. And I saw this in a pile of Korean War stuff. It didn't all belong to the same person. It was just kind of, the guy just heaped everything he had found military into a big pile. The stuff was just getting damaged. And this hat somehow had survived. He wanted $15 for it, which I couldn't pass it up because of the condition of the hat. Just absolutely gorgeous. And I want to use this as a little bit of a tip here because you see these out there, and there is quite a difference between these hats and the World War II counterpart, the enlisted man's World War II hat. First of all, the color. It's a much more brown OD than that mustard OD. So that's one giveaway. And we'll zoom in here so you can kind of see. The material is also a little bit coarser material. The second thing is the World War II enlisted man's hats do not have this ribbing. It's just smooth in here. This ribbing is a Korean War manifestation, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. The visor is a very different feel. It's a thicker, heavier visor, a little bit shinier. And then the other thing, if we take it off here and we look inside the hat, you can see the sweat liner inside here. Most World War II caps do not have a full sweat liner like this, full sweat shield. Also, if you look underneath the visor, you can see it's brown. Most World War II caps are green under there. It's kind of just a real off-green color. So there's a couple of things to look for that show the difference between a Korean War enlisted cap and a World War II enlisted cap. Now, I wanted to point these out also because there are unscrupulous people out there who take these Korean War caps, and because of this ribbing right here, which almost looks like an officer's cap from World War II, they swap out the enlisted disc with an officer's emblem, and they try and pass it off as a World War II officer's cap. So how can you tell the difference between a World War II officer's cap and a Korean War mock-up? Well, once again, material. Brown versus kind of that more officer's green from World War II. The material just feels heavier, it feels cheaper than what you see in an officer's cap. If you take the officer's device off, if it's had the enlisted device on for any period of time, you will see the imprint. And that can't be done away with. So if you take that officer's device off and you see a circle like this, then you know that someone swapped them out. Another thing is these caps weren't designed for the officer's device. An officer's device should sit below the horizon of the cap, or below the peak of the cap right here. A lot of times, to try and swap them out, it'll actually sit higher. And that is incorrect. So if you rub your hand across it, actually bump the top of the officer's device. And that is incorrect. And then back to the interior. Once again, should not have this full sweat shield and green rather than the brown. And another thing, the grommet on the inside, the item that gives the hat its shape, should be kind of a thin metal loop versus kind of a thicker plastic loop. This has a much thicker, it's almost like a tube in here, which gives it its shape. So clearly a Korean War cap. But I think it's just exceptional. The price paid for it was $15 once again, so I could not pass it up. Now I want to finish by showing you this right here. I display most of my headgear on glass heads. I've looked at styrofoam, but I have lots of problems with styrofoam. Number one, styrofoam is solid versus glass, which is clear. I love the clear because it kind of blends into the background and you focus more on the hat versus what's holding up the hat. And I have seen some bad styrofoam where people have tried to draw the eyes in and they don't do a very good job. And they try to put the lips on and do a horrible job. And you're immediately drawn right to that versus the really awesome piece of headgear. So that's one reason. Number two, the glass is an inert material. It will not react, sorry about that, bump the camera, it will not react with the cap. And when you look inside the cap again, you can see the leather sweatband. Styrofoam tends to do what's called off-gas. And what happens is you put that hat on the styrofoam head, it sits there for, 6 months, a year on display, you go to take it off and it pulls off and you have damage on the inside of that sweatband because it has actually stuck to the styrofoam. It can also discolor, like the sweat shield, you can see it's just kind of a nice clear. The styrofoam can cause this to then turn yellow, become hazy, and just look horrible. So that's number two. Number three, these are extremely heavy and they don't tip over easily. And I watched at a military show where a gentleman had a wonderful display of headgear and he had it all on styrofoam heads. He walked around his table to adjust something, bumped the table, and everything went over like dominoes. And just right down, 10, 15 hats, some falling on the floor, some falling over. And that showed me right away that the styrofoam, it looks nice, but it can be very top-heavy. These right here, I use these for hats, I use these for overseas caps, I use these for helmets. They actually work really well for helmets as well. Plus, they're gender-neutral face. You could put a woman's cap on there, it looks kind of female. You can put a man's cap, and it looks kind of male. The cost, they're a little more expensive than styrofoam. Styrofoam, you can pick up styrofoam heads $9, $8, sometimes in bulk, $7 a head. These run $20, and you can pick them up at a place called Pier 1 Imports. Pier 1 Imports, and, I swear by them. I really do. This kind of gives you an idea of my collecting foray for the last couple weeks. There are more items, so I'm going to have to do kind of a part 2 video, which I will be shooting a little bit later to show you the rest of what has come my way. But one thing I want to just remind everybody out there, when you are collecting, put the word out. Talk to friends, talk to family, talk to in-laws, talk to co-workers. Let them know you are interested because you never know what things like this are just going to pop up. And a lot of times, it's just they don't know what to do with it. They don't want it around anymore. They don't want to take it to Goodwill. They don't want to throw it out. And they would just love to give it to somebody who will care for it. And you know what? It's nice when that person can be you. So remember, talk to your friends and talk to your family. Well, that concludes this episode on recent finds for the collection. Please stay tuned for future episodes where I'll be talking about my Foot Locker project, my field desk display, and my helmet collection, among other interesting topics. Feel free to leave comments and questions, like if you liked it, and please subscribe. So, until next time, this is Steve reminding you to do your part and keep 'em rolling.